Can you imagine a world in which tulip flowers sold for over $500,000? Can you imagine a world in which small stuffed animals sold for over $10,000? Well, you don't have to imagine, because that is the world that we are living in. And no, they don't currently sell for these prices. But in this video, I'm gonna be diving into some very specific bubbles in history that have had just insane increases in price, insane skyrocketing values in random things, and then it just comes tumbling back down. And I think there's a lot of valuable lessons that we can learn from these historical events, and I also think they're pretty fascinating. So if you guys have not heard of Tulip Mania or the Beanie Baby Bubble, definitely stick around at the end of this video, because it is absolutely mind-blowing what human greed can lead to. It really is. So hopefully you find this video helpful and entertaining. If you do, please smash the thumbs up button and subscribe if you have not already. And yeah, let's dive into my computer so that we can talk about this stuff in detail, because oh my gosh, it is really cool. All right, so the first mania that I want to talk about is the Dutch Tulip Bulb Market Bubble. And if you have not heard of this one, basically what it is back in the 1600s, yes, this took place quite a long time ago, almost 400 years ago, if my math is correct. Yes, almost 400 years ago, these bulbs of tulips were basically something that were used as a status symbol for the wealthy Dutch individuals. And apparently this was in the middle of the Dutch Golden Age, and because of that, the middle class had a pretty high disposable income in that time, and they were flaunting these tulips in the same way that we might flaunt a Lamborghini or a Rolex on your wrist, or a pair of, I don't know, a pair of Yeezys on your feet. You know, whatever you're into. This was the same type of status symbol as these things that nowadays we show off that don't really have much intrinsic value. You know, a Gucci t-shirt that costs $750 is not really any better than this, I don't know, $10 t-shirt that I have on right now, but people are willing to pay that because of the status symbol effect. Now, this is basically just the setup, the backstory for this particular bubble. And these were so incredibly valuable because they were brought over from Turkey, and they were considered to be ridiculously foreign, ridiculously out of there. You know, I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it, but essentially normal people wanted to have as much of these as possible because it was like a status symbol. So that's basically all you need to understand. And what happened was, tulips are only able to grow, it's like once every 7 years. That's how long it really takes them to grow, to be able to harvest the tulips correctly. And they're very, very delicate when they're being transported. And there was this certain type of tulip bulb, bear with me now, there was a certain type of tulip bulb that had some type of virus. And because of that, it was mutated, and it had this pattern that looked like a flame. You can see here. And honestly, this is a pretty cool looking flower. This is a pretty cool looking flower, I got to admit. You know, I would love to have a flower that looked like this. But I am not willing to pay an arm and a leg for that flower. So what happened was, people started to speculate on this market, and it had a combination of different factors, including some type of plague where there were a lot of people who died, and the labor market diminished, meaning that wages went up, everything became more expensive, and they could not produce enough of these tulips. They could not make enough of these tulips, and because of that, the price started to increase, especially for these ones. And it got to the point where people were not even buying the bulbs themselves, they were buying futures contracts. So instead of saying, here, I'll give you $100 for one tulip, they said, I'll give you $100 for this futures contract, and in a year's time, or in 6 months' time, you'll give me one tulip. So you pay $100 for that contract, and in a year's time, you'll be able to redeem that contract for one tulip. But here's the thing. People started buying these futures contracts with no intention of actually getting the tulips in the future. They bought these futures contracts to resell the futures contracts for more in the future. So say I wanna get in on this. I would pay $100 for a futures contract. I can turn around and go and sell that for $250, you know, a couple weeks later. That's pretty insane. You know, I invested $100 and I sold it for $250. And you might think, wow, $100, $250 for one tulip? That's nuts. Here's where it gets crazy, guys. This thing went as absolutely insane. It got to the point where the rarest tulip bulbs traded for as much as 6 times the average person's annual salary. That is, I can't even comprehend that. And if we go down and put it in terms of today's money, look at this. A single bulb of a tulip cost as much as $750,000 in today's money. That is absolutely insane. Now, I've seen, some varying figures on different websites. I've seen 250,000, I've seen 500,000, but regardless of what it is, if you're paying more than $100,000 in today's money for a tulip, more than 10,000, I mean more than let's be real, guys. If you're paying more than like $50 for tulips, you are out of your damn mind. You are out of your mind. But the thing is, people don't do this because of the intrinsic value. They don't do this because they think a tulip is really worth $750,000. No one thinks a tulip is worth $750,000, but they buy it thinking that, okay, if I'm paying $750,000 for it, some schmuck is going to come along behind me and I'm going to be able to sell it to him for $1 million. So yeah, I just made a stupid purchase, but someone else is going to make an even stupider purchase. So people tend to get sucked into these manias where they are so focused on their greed, they are so focused on the potential profit that they don't consider how far the particular asset has increased in price in comparison to what it actually should be worth. Every single person on the street knows that a tulip is not worth $750,000. It's just not. It's common fact. I mean, you could go ask a hobo, you could go ask a 2-year-old, and they would tell you a tulip is not worth $750,000. But people are willing to pay that because they think that they'll be able to resell it for more. And it got especially bad because some of these futures contracts basically were extremely leveraged, and you only had to put down, I think the tax was like 5 or like 10%, something like that. So if you wanted to buy a futures contract that technically was for $100,000, you might only have to put down $10,000 worth. And when you get leverage involved in a bubble, that is when stuff gets really, really out of hand. So this is the craziest example, and it got to a point where I think they had a show, trying to sell some of these tulips for some insane prices, and nobody showed up. And news of that spread through the Netherlands extremely quickly, and you can see the price just absolutely plummeted. It just absolutely plummeted. So you might have bought a tulip for $750,000 here, and a couple months later, you're trying to sell that tulip or the futures contract for that tulip, and you're selling it for, $500 or something like that. And don't get me wrong, $500 for a tulip is still way overpriced. But I mean, that's what happens when these bubbles pop. And it's so ridiculous an example that if you haven't heard of it in the past, like it's crazy, man. It's mind blowing. Who pays that much for a damn tulip, bro? That's wild. And this is just kind of built into human nature. And we've had so many bubbles throughout the course of human history because of the fact that people like to speculate and they like to pay a ridiculous amount of money for something that is overpriced. And if they really thought about it, they would know it's overpriced because they think they'll be able to sell it for more. And this is the exact same reason that you have people buying into stocks at the very top. Stocks that have run up 1,000,000% in a month. They'll buy into that stock because they think that they'll be able to sell it to some other schmuck later on. Or maybe sometimes people are so caught up in the mania that they really believe that a single tulip is worth $750,000. Now, it's tough for me to believe that, but man, there's been some crazy bubbles in history. So the tulip bubble is probably the most ridiculous example that I've seen, but another one that you guys may not have heard of, and this one is a lot more recent, is a crazy story. And I want to talk about it because it's pretty freaking cool, man. So it is the Beanie Baby Bubble of 1999. And basically what it was is this dude right here, he was actually, he was a genius. And it came down to manufactured scarcity. And this is something that a lot of fashion brands use to increase the perceived value of what they're selling. But basically what that means is you have the ability to create as many of your product that you're selling as you want, but because you want the price to be really high, you make it seem like there's a low supply of it, because people are only willing to pay a lot when they know that other people are trying to buy that same exact thing and they have to bid more if they want to get that thing. And I have so many examples of this. You know, I bought some Bad Bunny concert tickets recently, and I paid probably more than I should have for them. Originally, I think they were selling for like, I don't know, the close seats were like $500 or something. I think I paid like $1,200 a pop. And now I went in just to check today. They're reselling for as high as $10,000 a ticket, which is absolutely nuts. But the thing is, there's scarcity there because there's only a certain number of seats, and people really want to go see this concert after, you know, several years without going to concerts. So this is just one example, and there's so many. But the Beanie Baby Bubble was just another example. I don't want to read this whole article for you. I guess I can link it down in the description, but it's pretty crazy. And he basically manufactured this scarcity, and he sold them for, you know, $5, $10 at first, but he sent them to different locations and then would say that they were all sold out. And people started collecting them and reselling them for ridiculous prices. And at the peak of the bubble, these little Beanie Babies, this little stuffed animal with, I guess, like beads inside. I don't know if you guys know what this is, but they sold for over $10,000 per piece on eBay, some of the best collections, which is mind-blowing, guys. It's mind-blowing. I don't know who the hell would pay for that. And this is just one picture from a divorce court where they literally have to divide up their Beanie Baby collection. These are grown human beings who are fighting over stuffed animals because the mania got to such a ridiculous degree. And it's pretty insane, and it's honestly pretty cool just to understand the psychology behind it and the human nature. But there were a lot of horrible things that happened because people get so caught up in their greed. You know, a West Virginia man was shot and killed a security guard over several $100s worth of Beanie Babies, bro. Someone died over Beanie Babies, over stuffed animals. That's how ridiculous people can get. And the bubble, you can see here, this is just kind of a little depiction of it. Back in 1998, this particular set was selling for $1,300, and now, 20 years later, it's selling for $3. So there were people who invested their life savings into these things thinking they were great long-term investments. Like, man, this is really going to appreciate over time. Like this guy, the family who lost $100,000. He put in a bunch of money over 5 years, and with the idea that the toys would appreciate and one day fund college tuition for his 5 children. This man spent $100,000 on these little Beanie Babies thinking they would pay for his kids' college tuition. And now his kids, I mean, they must have gotten the money somewhere, or they didn't go to college, because this $100K real quickly turned into $500. So it's pretty sad, man. It's pretty sad. You know, someone who dumped her $12,000 life savings into the toys and watched their fortunes dwindle. It's so sad for me to see this. And I have people DM me all the time who say they bought into a stock right at the top, because that's kind of when human greed is at its highest. You see this thing going straight up, your FOMO starts kicking in. You're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to miss out on these gains. I'm going to buy it right here. But then it starts tanking, and you don't want to cut your losses because you don't want to be wrong. You want to sell at a profit, and so you keep holding. And before you know it, you're down 50, 60, 70, 80% on your position. I hate to see this, man, but I see this all the time because people never learn from the past. We've had so many bubbles, and not even just in bubbles, man, but stocks, they run the same way. There's stocks where it goes really high and you think it can't go any higher, but then it keeps going higher, and then everyone who thought it couldn't go higher here starts buying in up here way higher because they think it's going to go even higher, and then it all comes crashing back down. I hate to see it. I hate to see people get caught up in this, but that's how human nature works, and if you can learn this, it can allow you to profit off of this by taking advantage of these insane runs when you could have been buying Beanie Babies and potentially reselling them for $10,000 a piece, but then you're not stuck holding all this inventory that's useless to you because they're trash and they're not really worth that much, you know? That's what's crazy. And here's just one more example. Now, NFTs, this is a very controversial topic. Controversial? I think I said that right. This is a very debated topic because this is a new technology that has recently come out, and it kind of goes along with cryptocurrency, but I personally do not understand this at all. Now, let me scroll down just a little bit so you can see. This is from NBA's Top Shot, and it's based on blockchain-based trading card game, and what they do is they sell highlights. But it's an NFT version of the highlight. It's this exclusive highlight, except they can make as many as they want. It's digital. They could make 50 versions. They could make 1,000,000 versions. And it's all based on what they say the scarcity is. So it's the same type of thing that the Beanie Baby dude did, where he manufactured the scarcity even though he was making millions of these things already. So they can make as many as they want, but they say it's a rare item, and then it ends up selling for $200,000. And before you get like, all right, you know, maybe a LeBron jersey's worth $200,000. No, it's not a jersey. It is a highlight. This is literally a video that I can go watch right now for free on YouTube. Someone paid $200,000 for that. And the reason they did that was because they believe that they're going to be able to resell that for more in the future. I don't think there's anyone who is paying $200,000 for a video you can get for free online because they think it actually has an intrinsic value of $200,000. There is no way. I refuse to believe that people are that stupid. The reason people pay $200,000 for a highlight video of LeBron dunking is because they think someone else is going to come along behind them and pay $250,000 for that. They just made $50,000 by buying a LeBron highlight video. So these are the types of things where you guys got to be really careful in these bubbles, especially when there's low liquidity, because when the bubble pops, it will be impossible to get out of your position anywhere near what you paid for it. And this, you know, this LeBron James highlight is a great example, because if people stop buying these things, do you think anyone's going to pay even $20,000 for a highlight video? I wouldn't pay $5 for a highlight video, let alone $20,000, let alone $200,000. So at some point, I think a lot of people are going to get stuck with a lot of useless highlight videos that you can get for free just because some company created them and said that they were exclusive. So it's pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy. And this manufactured scarcity actually relates back to stocks, because stocks that are low float, meaning there's not a lot of shares out there, it has scarcity. And when there's a low float, when there's a low amount of supply available, when the demand goes through the roof, speculators pile on, these things just go absolutely out of control. So I find all of these examples absolutely fascinating. And I think learning from the past, learning from history, learning what bubbles do, I think this allows us to be able to profit from them, but not get caught up in the hype, not get caught up in the mania, and realize that when everyone is buying it, when everyone is thinking, man, there is no way this is going to come down, that is when it is going to come down very soon and come down very hard. That's what she said. All right, I'll see you guys in the next video. Until then, let's grow better together. Preguntar, bebé, dime por qué te mientes. No puedes esconder todo lo que tú por mí sientes.